Morning to you both. Alex,
Morning, Will.
I'll start with you, if I may. Do you think it's plausible that we can see a deal for TikTok's U.S. business carved out in time?
Absolutely. I mean, you could see Microsoft decide to pull out. Bill Gates himself said the deal is a poison chalice. So maybe Microsoft says, hey, maybe this is not something we want to get involved with. And then who does it fall to? It can fall to a company like Twitter. So are they going to do a great job with the app? I mean, they already had Vine, and that didn't go very well for Twitter. So, they could acquire it, but I don't really have a lot of faith in the company to actually do anything productive with it if they do buy it.
Gene, do you think something can happen quickly? And if not, how long does Facebook's Reels need to have in order to really steal a significant amount of TikTok's market share? Gene?
I think that there's the counter case that maybe nothing ultimately happens here, that ultimately the TikTok does potentially get shut down, and the acquisition phase is a little bit of a complicated road. And just to quickly lay it out, is that we're talking about really fracturing the business. TikTok's business is global users in two, same brand, two different entities running that. M&A is complicated, but when you layer on that piece and separately, what makes social networks so magical is the network effect. And so my view is when you hear some things like what's going on with Bill Gates and look at the other big tech companies that would not have an interest, Facebook's not going to have an interest, highly unlikely that Apple would have an interest, potentially Twitter, but they have some market cap parameters around making that deal happen. I'm actually starting to lean to this case where maybe it gets shut down. And to answer your second part of the question is, what does this mean for Reels? What you're seeing is the main content developers. They're starting to shift their weight to like Reels or to other platforms in anticipation of something negative happening to TikTok. But I suspect that if it's shut down temporarily, which I think it would be, that they would quickly come back just to simply hedge their bets. And so this is a pretty dynamic situation. One thing that difficult to predict whether it's acquired or not acquired or gets shut down. One thing I do believe is that TikTok is going to be around in the next 12 months, and maybe it's a standalone, maybe it's part of something else, but it's here to stay.
Alex, should we expect more significant Chinese retaliation, potentially directly at a company like Apple?
Well, I think you could see Chinese retaliation, but we also know that China's already blocked a handful of big U.S. tech companies here. I agree with what Mark Zuckerberg said to his employees this past week, which is not just China, but it's countries around the world that can see this as a precedent and ask themselves, hey, has Facebook been net positive or net negative for our country? And then think about shutting Facebook down, inside their countries. So it's not as much China versus the U.S., but it's two visions of very different internets that are starting to emerge around the world. And can the United States tech companies see some blowback in countries outside of China? I think that's likely.
Gene, do you think Apple's run up too much in the short term?
Not at all. One of our predictions for 2020 is this would be the best performing FANG stock. I stick behind that. The scorecard is not good for that prediction right now. Amazon's up 71% year to date. Apple's up 52%. Pretty wide gap to close here. But, well, I'm confident that that gap does get closed. And ultimately, I think investors, as they really anchor themselves on what the 5-year trends are on Apple, whether it's 5G, multiple-year upgrade cycle, wellness, all the AR, potentially something in autonomy, all these pieces that have been well framed in, I think that it begs ultimately the key question here is, why isn't treated with a fair multiple? And the reason is because it has a hardware business. But I believe that investors will increasingly view this on par with some of the other tech giants. You put a 22 or 27 multiple, which is kind of consistent, on 22 earnings, which is probably 2 or 3 years out, you get to $600. And so I still believe that the street is largely missing this. I know that it's hard to fathom these 2 trillion plus market caps, but it's hard to fathom, equally as difficult to understand how much of an impact and how fundamental Apple has become the fabric of our lives.